Hi, my name is Cheryl Brumbaugh-Cayford, and I want to thank Fox Valley Citizens for Peace and Justice for inviting me to report on my experience at the World Council of Churches Assembly, or the WCC for short, the WCC Assembly that was held in the city of Karlsruhe, Germany on August 31 to September 8, 2022. I was part of the Church of the Brethren delegation. This assembly is held only every 8 or so years. There were close to 4,000 people in attendance, including delegates from most of the WCC's 352 member communions, ecumenical and interfaith observers and guests, local participants, including officials from the city and area, hosts from the churches in Germany and churches in the wider region, including France and Switzerland, representatives of humanitarian organizations, seminary students from various places, and young adult stewards, or the volunteers who were there from around the world as assistants, among other people. Every continent was represented, is what we heard in announcements. It is thought to have been the most diverse Christian gathering ever held in the world history. My job was to report on behalf of my denomination, so I carried my camera everywhere and attended all the major sessions. And I want to start showing you some images of those sessions. I'll share my screen. What you're looking at is one of the business sessions. And in those business sessions, it was clear that the main agenda was church action and response to the crises facing our world: climate change, war and militarism, the war in Ukraine in particular, and the related migrant and refugee crises, the situation in Israel and Palestine, among others. The main statements that were adopted by the assembly were the things that make for peace, moving the world to reconciliation and unity; living planet, seeking a just and sustainable global community; war in Ukraine, peace and justice in the European region; seeking justice and peace for all in the Middle East. And then there were 4 other, what they called minutes or short documents that were adopted on various places of conflict in different parts of the world. And then some documents that were worked on during the assembly are being worked on following the assembly. They weren't completed. And so the WCC Central Committee and Executive Committee are working on those following on the assembly. Also under discussion were the inequities facing several groups of people in the churches and society, and the need for inclusion of them in leadership. And these groups that received focused attention were Indigenous people, people with disabilities, and youth and young adults. And there was also concern for the need for a new and just relationship between women and men in the churches and society. Pre-assembly meetings were held on each of these concerns. I experienced the assembly as uniquely diverse, egalitarian, and respectful event, more welcoming and celebrative of human differences and variety than I've experienced elsewhere. The leadership was remarkable, and here you will see on the big screen and at the head table, Agnes Oboam, the moderator, who's from Kenya, who set the tone of gentleness and affirmation and welcome for each person. Having an African woman in leadership with male leaders, especially from Orthodox Christian bodies serving in assisting roles to her, was a remarkable statement in and of itself. I want to share a couple other images of the assembly. Here is a picture of the worship tent. It was a big tent set up in the middle of the conference area where the meeting was being held, an outdoor setting. And here's an image of one of the plenaries. You can get a feel for the size of the event and the colorfulness of it. I love the way the people who are in charge of the lighting for the plenaries had so much fun with color and design. So the thing I was asked specifically to report back to this group was the discussions of nuclear weapons and international efforts to create a nuclear-free world. And so partly for that reason, but mostly for my own interest, I signed up for a day-long bus tour on the topic Towards a Nuclear-Free World. It was led by members of the peace movement in Germany, And it also touched on what German churches are doing in the way of climate action. I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute. And then we'll share again some more photos. The 3 stops on the tour took us along the Rhine, and we had an opportunity from the bus to see some of the medieval castles along the river, which was fun. We also saw the evidence of the terrible drought that has struck that part of Europe and other areas in the dried and browning pine forests on the slopes along the river. I was actually shocked to see Germany not entirely green. I'd never seen it that way before. The first stop on our bus tour was at a church in the village of Bingen, where there's a local ecumenical movement called Churches for Future. They're working with local scientists and science professors to educate and offer people climate actions that they can take in their own community. Our second stop was a village in the Hunsrück area, where we met with a local pastor and his wife, Jutta von Dahl, who successfully led an effort in the 1980s to prevent the placing of cruise missiles at the nearby U.S. Air Base in Hasselbach. And now I'm going to share a screen again. And the photo you'd already seen, this is Jutta holding up one of the peace symbols that they were putting in the windows of their village to protest the cruise missiles that were going to be placed at that air base. She's standing and holding the dove, and her husband over here to her left is the man with the long white beard. And he didn't speak a whole lot. I'm not sure if that was because he's not familiar enough with English, or she's the one who speaks for them. So the story is that in 1983, the German government had agreed to NATO plans to station 96 cruise missiles in Germany. These would have been able to reach Moscow in 2 hours, flying low under radar, which meant they couldn't be detected by the USSR, but also they couldn't be called back in case of an error. The missiles would have been armed with nuclear weapons, each with the destructive power of more than 1,000 Hiroshimas. The village found out that the cruise missiles would be stationed less than a mile away and began to take action. Their campaign started out small. They had a banner that Jutta and her pastor husband hung on their house, which said, "You shall not kill, no cruise missiles in the Hunsrück." Then they started taking these little peace doves around the area for people to put in their windows. Then a farmer had an idea to put up 96 crosses between the airbase and the highway. And I'm going to show you a poster of those crosses that was displayed for us to see. Then Jutta and her husband began going to the airbase every Sunday afternoon, and that weekly vigil attracted more and more people until there were hundreds gathering every Sunday from around Germany and even from other countries. The campaign culminated with a nationwide demonstration that brought some 200,000 people together against the cruise missiles in October 1986. Whether that had an impact is not known for sure, but by 1989, President Reagan and President Gorbachev had signed the INF Treaty banning medium-range nuclear weapons. So this group in the Hunsrück claims at least some success from their campaign. And one of the fun bits of the campaign was some young people wanted to do some artwork related to the campaign, and a farmer who was willing to offer a barn to be painted, offered this barn. And the story of how this missile cow came to be painted on the side of the barn is that the farmer's wife, or the woman of the house, her kitchen looked out onto the barn, and she did not want an image that she could not look at and be happy about every day. So their original idea for the images on the barn were much more in your face. This is on the back of the barn, and you can see that it's much more dire and less life-affirming image. And so they ended up with what is now called the missile cow, which I think was great. And you can see our tour group standing in front of the barn, waving people up to come closer to look at it. So the next stop on our Next stop on our bus tour, we were taken from that story of success to a story of still waiting for success. We met with a group that has created a peace meadow outside the gates of a German airbase near the town of Buchel, where U.S. nuclear weapons are stationed now. And this is an image of part of the fence around that airbase. The peace meadow is a little peace camp where vigils and demonstrations are held. And here's an image of people welcoming our bus to that peace camp called the Peace Meadow. There are larger or sponsoring organizations supporting this group of local people who are keeping this witness going. And it has been going, they told us, for some 25 years. That's a long-term peace witness. The nuclear weapons that they're protesting against are owned by the US. They're maintained by US military personnel. They're designed to be deployed by being loaded on German fighter jets, which will be flown by German pilots to bomb locations that are determined by the United States. During the bus ride there, we got a lecture on this situation from a man named Dirk Michael Hartson. I may not have his name correct. My apologies if it's not correct. He has been studying the US nuclear weapons agreements with particular European countries. And I've not done my own homework to confirm what he told us. This is something I'd like to do. But I'll report what he said. He explained that this arrangement is called nuclear sharing or nuclear participation. During peacetime, the US retains control of these nuclear weapons, and they are simply stationed on their partner country's airbase. I'm going to show you an image of that airbase and the entrance to it. Once war is declared, the partner country is obliged to use its aircraft to deploy the weapons at the command of the US, with the targets predetermined by the US. These partner countries include Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, each with one airbase with US nuclear weapons, and Turkey and Italy, each with two airbases with US nuclear weapons. And at each of these airbases, there are 20 nuclear weapons, according to the research piece people have done. So something like 100 nuclear weapons ready to be deployed at a moment's notice across Europe. Again, these are designed to be flown under the radar, fighter jets flying under radar, meaning that they cannot be detected by the enemy, but also they cannot be recalled. This arrangement takes advantage of a loophole in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Dirk Michael said is considered not valid during time of war. And again, a shocking statement and one that needs to be researched. The peace camp's goal is to get these nuclear weapons out of their neighborhood and out of Germany. And as I said, they've been working on this for some 25 years, is what they told us. Their concern is not just for the German pilots who would be in the position of having to fly and bomb, carry out nuclear genocide from this airbase, but also for the many American families of the US military who are living on this airbase to maintain the weapons. And these children are living and growing up and going to school. And someone pointed out to me the building, which is the school, which can be seen from the fence, just across the base from 20 nuclear weapons. So here's another image of the entrance to this base and the sign in front that says atom bombs are forbidden, and the tent that is placed there with a lot of information for people who want to visit and see what's going on. So a couple days later, I attended another presentation that touched on the World Council of Churches' support for the international ban on nuclear weapons. The WCC group connecting with this is called the Churches Commission on International Affairs, or CCIA. And what you see here is their panel presentation. The chair of this group reported that banning nuclear weapons has been a focus for the WCC actually since the beginning of the council in 1948, right after World War II, when the council also began to consider war as not according to God's will. Partnering with the WCC on the work to ban nuclear weapons is the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or ICAN for short. It's a coalition of non-governmental organizations promoting adherence to and implementation of the UN Nuclear Weapons Ban Treaty. The Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is the title. It entered into force in January 2021. At this point, 68 nations have already ratified it. ICANN won the Nobel Peace Prize for its work toward this treaty in 2017. I took the opportunity to ask some questions of the CCIA chair about the treaty and what it is expected to be able to accomplish, given that the major nuclear powers are not going to sign. His response is that the treaty is already setting precedents and is considered a major advance in international affairs. He said it is creating a new international standard. They know that the numbers of nuclear weapons are increasing and the number of nuclear states are gradually increasing. But those states, he said, are not leading by example. The point of the treaty is to establish a new normative standard, a new norm to say that nuclear weapons are not okay. The ambition to get more and more ratifications from countries that haven't signed yet, so that it becomes more and more clear that the majority of the world is against nuclear weapons, eventually will make the few nuclear states become a painful and obvious minority among the world's countries. The World Council of Churches, at its last assembly held in South Korea, became more involved in peacemaking work across the divide between North and South Korea. And the WCC leadership at that time took the opportunity to work with churches in both North and South to serve as a facilitator for dialogue and conversation across that border. And so at this assembly, the Korea Peace Appeal Campaign had a booth, and they had a petition to end the Korean War and to end the use and placement of nuclear weapons. So, of course, when I saw their booth, I rushed across to sign the petition. I don't know how many signatures they got, but I hope they got a lot. It's very important. The Korean churches sponsored this booth, and the peace appeal to end the Korean War would also establish a peace agreement, create a nuclear-free Korean peninsula and a nuclear-free world, and break away from the vicious arms race to instead invest our money in human security and environmental sustainability. Truly a really necessary action. I also want to mention the Wuppertal Call, which the World Council of Churches has helped to facilitate on the environmental and climate side of the need for action for our world. Take a look at it if you have a chance. It's a call to churches from a meeting held a couple of years ago to really begin taking serious and effective action for the climate. It's called the Wuppertal Call. I have asked our chair, Mary Shesgreen, to send out to the Fox Valley Citizens for Peace and Justice email list a listing of links to all the documents I've mentioned and the organizations I've mentioned in this presentation, so that you can look it up and find more information for yourself. Thank you so much for your attention. This is more than you wanted to know, I'm sure. I really appreciate the chance to share with you. Thank you so much.